I'm at my home in Salt Lake City, and I get a knock on the door. Open the door, and it's an FBI agent, and he hands me a paper. It's a subpoena for a grand jury. I took this paper. I called my attorney. I said, what's going on here? We had been doing Undercover for a number of years and had a great relationship with the federal police in Mexico, some of the best men and women in law enforcement that I've worked with. And they were concerned that there was a large increase in trafficking across the border in Mexicali, Tijuana, etc. Some of the children that were being trafficked across into the US and Americans that were going down across the border to engage in illicit activities with these children. And so they wanted us to go in and figure out who was selling the kids, where they were coming from, et cetera. Now, at the time, Tijuana was one of the most dangerous cities in the world. In fact, if not the number one, it was within the top 2 or 3 most dangerous cities from a homicide standpoint. So from a population, the number of murders per capita in that population, me and Jimmy, we didn't want to go in by ourselves. We've had some training, but we made sure that Joseph could come. Joseph was one of the top Krav Maga trainers in the world. In fact, he's qualified to go back to Israel and train the trainers. Now, for you who don't know about Krav Maga, is Israeli Special Forces hand-to-hand combat training, one of the most lethal on earth. And Joseph's one of the best trainers I've ever seen. Now, one of his top students is a guy by the name of Matt Smith. Matt had done some other undercover work with us, and this guy can move faster than anybody I've ever seen. And is, from a safety standpoint, if we're going into a place that dangerous, we needed some guys like that were with us. And so the good thing about having guys who know hand-to-hand combat and Krav Maga, you don't take guns, you don't take a sniper on the roof and night vision goggles when you're going in these dangerous places. You're going in just with your hands. Hopefully you're not going to have to get in a position where you have to use those skills, but it's good to be safe. And so we go in. Within a very short period of time, we were able to connect with a couple street vendors that were selling drugs, selling girls, etc. The street vendor connected us with a 22-year-old prostitute named Maria. Maria had been working for the same pimp for over a decade, since she was 11 years old. As we were talking to her about what she was doing and who she was working with, I paid her to introduce me to her boss. That's who we want to get with. In fact, usually it takes at least a day and a couple different operations to get to what I call a level 3. These are the ones who physically control the children. Usually is what will happen is somebody on the ground, the guy selling coke and whatnot, they'll introduce us to what I call a level 2. They're the ones that are pimps of women and they have access to the children. And then we've got to work harder to find out who's actually controlling the children themselves. Well, in this case, boom, we went right to the top. This was a really bad man. He was an escaped convict from the United States and had been living in Mexico and trafficking children for over 15 years. So this girl had been working with him for the last 11 years. We pay her to introduce us to him. We go in. She called him Gordo, this big, fat guy. He called himself King Jesse. So King Jesse was there and he's like, oh, absolutely, I can provide anything that you're looking for. You just tell me. And he started showing us some pictures of some girls. Then he started showing us pictures of some younger girls and younger ones, and then some children. He claimed to be able to provide up to 20 children for any party, any day. He also claimed that he was in contact with a bunch of other pimps in the area that could provide anything that we needed. So this was a high-level trafficker. So I exchanged contact information with King Jesse. I made sure that I had his email. I made sure I had his Facebook and all of his information, his phone number. By then, I had a very good undercover profile that was set up. So he got my business card. He was able to connect with me on social media, etc. We want to make sure that we're able to connect with every trafficker in the area so that we can shut it down. We connected with another street hustler by the name of Enrique. Enrique, he was strung out on drugs, but claimed to have access to anything that Americans were looking for while in that area. He told us there were 2 hotels in the area that were known as a place that you could buy children. One of them was Hotel America, and one of them was the Caesar Hotel. Now that we know, the feds could go in and close things down, but we needed to find out more about what was going on there first. And so we looked online, we found a place called the Caesar Hotel, and we went in. It was super beautiful. This place was nice. In fact, they had a woman that was there at the front that was a classy dress, and I'm like, this does not look like the typical places that we have found for children being sold. And so we asked her some questions about who the boss was there, who the owner was, and what other services the hotel offered. And it said she looked at us like we were crazy. Well, come to find out, there was 2 hotels named Caesar. This one was a nice, respectable place. The other one was a dump owned by some of the traffickers. And so once we found out there was a second hotel named the Caesar, we went there, connected with some of the guys that were there, and they said, oh yeah, you tell us what you want. Our boss will get you anything that you're looking for, anything. And so we said, great, have him show us the inventory. We needed to make sure they really had the kids before we called in the sting and before we brought our guys in there. And so I said, get me in touch with your boss. They said, no, our boss will meet you here. Okay, we're fine with that. And he'll bring you an 8-year-old and an 11-year-old so you can verify he has what your boss is looking for. We said, great, I'll pay him just to let us verify. We just want to see them. But if you bring, because then what can happen if they bring them to us? First of all, get contact with the guy who's selling them. Number 2, we can get verification of who they are and maybe even get pictures for our boss that we really send into the federal police to figure out where these kids are coming from. And we either do the sting when they bring the kids, or we can geotag the location if we can get them to take us to where the kids are. So we're sitting there outside the hotel, and they said, come on in here. Come on in. We'll just wait in here for this guy to come, this boss. And we really wanted to meet this boss. So we go and we follow him into this hotel. Well, this is a seedy dump. We're waiting for the boss to come. The boss is a guy that's going to bring us an 8-year-old and an 11-year-old child for us to verify that he has what our boss is looking for. And so we meet with one of his main guys. He takes us into the hotel itself and said, wait back here. And we go back into this back room. As we're sitting back there, this place, not only is it seedy, dirty, scummy, we could imagine what kind of things happened in that hotel. And the energy itself was dark, was evil. There were bars on the windows just to make sure that whoever was in there couldn't get out. The mattresses, I don't even want to think about what happened on those mattresses. So we're sitting back in this room, and we've got 2 security guys that are really good. So we're in a safe place, right? We've got 2 of the best security guys I've ever worked with that are there. And there's me and Jimmy and these 2 guys, and our security guys are like, Paul, Jimmy, we are in a really dangerous position right now. There is no access out the backside of this hotel. The only way is the way that we came in. We're in a kill zone. This is a very dangerous place. We can't even secure what we're doing in here. They could be coming in with a whole bunch of guys. They could lock us in this room. There's a lot of bad things that could happen right here while we're waiting. I suggest that we go outside. So I'm like, okay, well, we're good. We'll go outside. So we start going outside. Now, Jimmy had to go to the bathroom on the way out. And so he goes to the bathroom. We go out in front. Well, as soon as we walk out in front of this hotel, this police car is driving by. And this officer in English, he said, what are you guys doing? Now, we're a bunch of white guys in one of the most dangerous cities in the world at the time, in one of the most dangerous neighborhoods of that city, at one of the most dangerous times of night to be in that city. And so he drives by, he rolls down his window. What are you guys doing? I says, we're just chilling, just hanging here. He said, you want to ride? I said, no, we're waiting for our Uber. Yeah, right. 4 white guys in that area of town just hanging out. We're up to no good for sure. Well, he goes, okay. And he drives around the corner, and then boom, from all directions, these local police officers with their guns on us, on the ground. We're like, crap. Okay. So we're sitting there on the sidewalk. Now, Jimmy's still inside. He's in there finishing up going to the bathroom, and the traffickers come into him and they say, hey, your buddies are all getting arrested out there. Stay in here with us. We'll keep you safe. And Jimmy tells the story. He's like, when you're at a place in life where you have two choices, and one of them is to go get arrested and taken to a Mexican prison, and the other is to stay where you are, and you decide that you're going to go get arrested, he said, that tells you something about the place you're in. There's some bad choices you made in your life where you have to make that choice between staying with child traffickers, getting arrested, and going to a Mexican prison. So he's like, hey guys, yeah, I'm going to go outside with my friends there and see if I can help. Of course, he comes out with his hands up and they arrest him as well. Well, they were sitting there on the curb and they've got handcuffs on us. So I'm handcuffed to Andy. And we had done a bunch of undercover stuff together. And he looks at me, he's like, Paul, every time I go to Mexico with you, I end up in handcuffs, which is true because when we're doing the undercover missions, we get arrested by the federal agents and everybody thinks that we got taken to the US to stand trial. Well, this was a different situation. We had just gotten there. The federal agents were in Mexico City. We were there just getting intel. And so they were all gone. This was late at night, right? So I couldn't just call them and say, hey, get us out of here, whatever else. And so we're getting handcuffed there. Federal agents know we're in town, but these local cops, of course, don't. Now, I don't know if they're good cops. I don't know if they're bad. We don't know. And some of these countries, we end up with some dirty cops. Some of them, we end up with some really, really good ones. Most of them, we end up with some really good ones that help us with the operation, but we don't know who's working with who. So they then put us in the police cars. Now, me and Andy are handcuffed together, and we're in the back of this police car where the head of the police is the one that's driving. As we start driving, immediately he asked me for a bribe. He said, listen, this is a really bad situation that you're in, but I can make it all go away. He said, you give me $2,000 per person for the 5 of you. So $10,000. I can make this all go away. We'll just take you to your hotel. You'll be done. You get out of here. He said, or you're going to go to jail. You're going to be there probably 6 months or longer before you even get a trial. He said, then it'll cost you $50,000, maybe $100,000 to be able to deal with all of this. That money is going to go into some judges' pockets and not into the real deal. He actually had a pretty valid argument. He said, listen, my guys are the ones doing the real work here. He said, you give me that $10,000, I'll make sure it gets in the hands of my local guys that are cleaning up stuff here. But otherwise, you're going to be in some big trouble. I said, well, big trouble for what? We didn't do anything. We were just hanging out at the hotel. He said, give me your phone. I'm handcuffed, to Andy, and I pull my phone out and I hand it over to him. He goes, unlock it. And I'm like, you know what? I need to make a phone call. I said, I need to call my attorney. And he said, you don't get an attorney. You don't even get a phone call. He said, this is Mexico. Your rights that you think that you had in the U.S. don't exist here. He said, how about this? And he said, we were driving up to this building. He said, that's a Mexican jail. How about I put you in there with whoever is there for the next 4 days? 4 days from now, you can decide if you want to unlock your phone for me. I'm like, yeah, maybe we should. We had only been down there a day, right? We hadn't really found a lot going on. We had connected with King Jesse. We had connected with the guys who were working for the guy that owned this hotel. Now, we found out later that one of the traffickers that we had met with was mad that we were trying to connect with some other ones. So he called his buddy, who was the head of the police in the area, and said, listen, I'll split the extortion money with you, type of a thing. So we're like, we didn't know this at the time. All we knew is this guy was trying to take some money from us. And so we pull up to the police station, and he said, how about this? I put you in that prison, that Mexican jail, for the next 4 days with whoever's in there. 4 days from now, you can decide if you want to unlock your phone for me. I'm like, okay, whatever. So I give him my phone and I unlock the phone, and he starts looking through it. He said, okay, now show me your pornography. Where's your pornography? I said, I don't have pornography. He goes, bull, you're looking for a sex party with children. Of course you got pornography on your phone. And then he starts going through all of my history on my web history. Of course, there's nothing there. And then he starts going through all my pictures. Of course, there's nothing there. Well, then he pulls up a folder called Cancun. Now, this was my burner phone that I used on a lot of undercover operations. He pulls up this this folder called Cancun. And we had recently done the rescue in Cancun. And in that folder had pictures of the girls that the traffickers had sent. So, I mean, they're fully clothed, but they're obviously 12, 13, 14 years old. And they're obviously being trafficked by these traffickers. So he's pulling up this phone. So he said, "You're going to jail. This is all I need right here." And I turned to Andy. I said, "Should we blow our cover yet?" And we decided that might be a good time, since number one, the federal police didn't know that we were getting arrested there. They were in Mexico City. We were just getting intel. Number two, we had the possibility of going into that Mexican jail and staying there for a long time until somebody figured out where we were. And I wasn't interested in that. Number three, we had just got there. We hadn't identified where any children were. We had connected with King Jesse. We had this Gordo guy. We had connected with the guys who were working for the guy who owned the hotel, but they hadn't brought us any children yet. So there wasn't any children at risk yet. We were just getting an intel. And we had enough intel where we could give that alone to the federal police and they could take care of this situation, right? So I'm like, okay, let's blow our cover. So I tell the officer who says, he's got my phone there. I said, "Sir, can you go to that next folder, please?" He opens up the next folder. I said, "Open that picture right there." He opens it. And it's a picture of me, Andy, Jimmy, and the other guys that were in the other car, and a bunch of federal officers right at the end of the Cancun rescue, right? So we're all posing. There's these federal officers with all their guns, and we're all sitting there smiling and whatever in the middle. I said, "That picture right there, that's me, him, and the guys in the other cars. And those are some of the top federal police in all of Mexico." And he stops the car and he's like, "Okay." I said, "Go to that next picture." I said, "That's me with President Vicente Fox." He's the former president of Mexico, right? I said, "That's me with President Vicente Fox. I'm in his office on the red phone." There's me in my white shirt, just like this on the red phone, right? And so I said, "We help your country find kidnapped children." And he's like, "Oh." So he gets out of the car, unhandcuffs us, and he radios the other car, and they all pull over as well, and we're all getting unhandcuffed right there. And he's like, "Oh, can we take?" He just asked me for a $10,000 bribe, right? He knew he was in trouble. Now, this was dangerous for us at this point because he knows that I know that he asked us for that bribe. And so we needed to figure out how to get out of there in a way where he didn't know where we were. So he said, "Can I take you to a hotel?" We said, Nope, we're good. We're good. We'll just get an Uber and we'll get a taxi." And we grabbed a taxi. And at this point, our cover was blown. It was dangerous for us to stay in that city. Even that night would be dangerous for us to stay there. And so we packed up our bags. Of course, it was too late for us to give the full report to the federal agents. We typed everything up and sent it all into them. And they would be back with us in the morning. And so from there, we decided, you know what, we're going to go find another hotel. We made sure that we weren't being followed. And we go get another hotel for that night. The next day, we're like, okay, we're already here. We've already booked out 3 days to figure out what was going on with trafficking. We've got some good leads there, but we need to figure out what else is going on down here. We're already here. And so we thought, you know what, we're going to drive south. And we get down to Ensenada. Once we're in Ensenada, we get out, we're walking the streets, just seeing what's going on, connect with a few guys that are there. One of them, he actually had a candy shop, and we called him the Candy Man. And he was using the candy shop as a front, but he was making his money as a pimp. And he had access to children. So we needed to figure out where he was getting the children. And so we exchanged contact information with him. Well, there was another guy that we had met by the name of Diablo. We had heard about him from some other places. And so as we were walking around, somebody introduces us to this guy named Diablo. Diablo had devil horns that were tattooed on his forehead. There's a lot of guys down there that are named, that they call themselves Diablo because it means devil in Spanish, right? So yeah, you've heard other ones where I call the traffickers that. This guy, this is what they called him, was Diablo. And devil horns that were tattooed on his forehead, and he was somewhat bald. And I'm sitting there, standing there next to him. We're on a street corner. There's a super busy street. And multiple people had said that Diablo sold children. that he could provide anything for Americans as they came down. So when I connect with him, so I'm standing there talking to Diablo, and I'm getting his contact information. I get his name and email and phone number and everything else so that we can stay in touch with each other so that I can turn that information in to the federal police. Well, Candyman walks by my guys. I've got Andy and Jimmy and Joseph and Matt that are kind of watching me just exchange. Me and Jimmy, we're in charge of talking. The other guys are making sure we don't die, right? So in this situation, all four of them were just watching me get information from this trafficker, making sure I don't die, so to speak. Well, Candyman comes and is talking to these guys, and one of them said, hey, you know what? That guy, he said, what's he doing? He said, well, Pablo, is my name, Pablo down there. Pablo's getting some information because he's going to help him with the party. Well, Candyman was mad because he wanted it to do it all himself. So he walks over, and I'm standing there next to Diablo, and he comes up on the side of Diablo and boom, just clocks him the side of the head. Boom, I'm walking away. I've got my phone, putting it in my pocket, and the video of these guys, Candyman is beating the crap out of this other trafficker. Now, this was kind of rewarding for me. These guys were both selling children. I'm okay with people selling children beating the crap out of other people who are selling children. So whatever has to happen to get them away from continuing to do what they're doing, fine. He throws him out in the middle of the street. Boom, he hits one of the cars. He's pounding on him. They're fighting back and forth. And then you can hear one on the video, one of my operators, he's like, oh, we got to go. We got to go. Let's go now. So boom, we take off. I've got his contact information. That's a win. We go and connect with a few others. There's a guy by the name of Shorty that was there. He was selling kids as well. And in fact, Andy had some undercover video stuff. He had this lid for his coffee cup. You'd be amazed at how many ways you can record covert video. Like, holy crap. I had a pen that had a high resolution video camera in it. By then I had a watch as well. This watch you cannot tell. You can be literally this close to the watch. You cannot tell there's a high resolution audio video camera inside the watch because there's these black dots that go around the top, and it just so happens that one of them is a camera. And two of the other ones are audio pickup ones as well. So Andy had this lid for a coffee cup. He went and got a coffee at Starbucks just so that he could take off their white lid and put his white lid on the top. And the little hole on the side that usually looks like it's something that is an air vent thing was an undercover camera. So he was picking up a lot of this stuff. We were picking up because we needed to send this stuff. Anytime these guys are doing things, if we can send this information to the federal police, then they can take these guys down. So this was a lot of great information about who was selling children in that area. So after we're done, we had been on a couple different nights there. We head back. We turned in all of that information. This was not an operation where, like the others, throw together a big party and have the Homeland Security agent come in with his camera and say, hey, look, this is all what happened here. No, our goal was the kids. Our goal was to, if we had enough information as to who was selling children, our job was done. We could send that into the head of the federal police. They could do the operation. We could help pay for some of the aftercare that was going on there. But our job was to be a confidential informant, find out who was selling the kids. So we got all of our information there. We leave and we turn the information into the federal police. Well, less than a week later, I start getting emails from this King Jesse. So I thought, wow, I thought that we blew our cover with him. I thought that he was the guy that turned us into the local police that wanted to extort us. Evidently, he wasn't, because he was still back and forth with me, and he was sending emails to my undercover email, et cetera. And he said, hey, these are some girls that I have for sale right here, and this is some other information I have. And then he's told me about a website. He said, listen, I can get you access to a website that Americans are using to pick out who they want to be with when they come down. He said it's a membership fee of $2,000 a month. He said, you pay $2,000 a month, you have full access to this website. You can look through all the models that are on there. You decide who you want, and then you can come down. I said, great, I'm very interested, because we needed to be. If we could get access to that, then we could figure out where these kids were coming from, et cetera. So he said, well, I need to get you in touch with a boss of mine. He said, but just send me a down payment of the money. And so I'm like, fine, I'll do that. Heck, to be able to get get that information for the federal police? For sure. So I sent him a little bit of money, and then he, boom, ghosted me, gone. I'm like, what the freak? Now, I was hoping that he got arrested, and I talked to the guys in the federal police, and they hadn't gotten him yet. They were still trying to catch up with him, et cetera. I'm like, crap, this guy just stole my freaking money, and we didn't get access to the place that we could then turn into the police as well. And so I didn't know what was going on. Well, then I texted him, I said, listen, you just ghosted me. I've got a friend in that area. Now, Paul Hutchinson's a nice guy. Paul Stone's an asshole, right? That's my undercover. And so I go full a-hole mode on these guys because that's what they're used to, right? And so I say, listen, I said, I'm not interested in you taking advantage of me. I'm sending these texts. I said, I sent you some money, some good money to be able to have access to this site that you have, and then you ghosted me? How about this? I'm sending Fernando in. Now, Fernando was just a dude that I met while I was in Ensenada. He was a hustler, but man, he was a get crap done hustler, right? And so I told him, listen, I've got a guy. I'm going to have him come. I'm going to take it out of your ass if I have to. I'm getting my money back. So that was the key that got him to finally text me back. He goes, sorry. He says, I got the money out of the Western Union that you sent me. He says, as soon as I got on the street, boom, I got hit, and they beat me up and put me in the hospital and whatever else. I said, what? How did they even know you had the money there? He said it wasn't some thugs. It was the local police. I'm like, okay, I already knew the local police were dirty. And I said, why were they taken? Well, evidently, he said that his boss, the one that was running the website, he said my boss wasn't paying his fees to the police. He was 3 months behind on his fees. I said, what do you mean his fees? He said, they're like the mafia here. He said they were allowing him to continue his organization in selling these children and the website. They knew about the website and everything else, but he had to pay them a certain amount every month in order for them to just let him do business. But he was 3 months behind, and they couldn't get a hold of him, so they came and hit me. So they took all of the money that you sent, and I got beat up. I just barely got out of the hospital. I don't know whether to believe his BS story or not, but knowing what I knew from the dirty cops that were there already, I now believe the fact that there was very likely some other corruption that was going in. So I wrote all of that together so the federal police could clean up that problem as well. I wasn't interested in going back down at this point. Number one, we didn't know who was compromised. Number two, the local police definitely were compromised in that area. Number three, we had all the information that we needed to be able to send to the federal police. And so I contacted the federal police and we said, hey, here's the rest of the information. Here's the things that are going on with the locals in that area. This guy said he was beat up because they were being paid off, et cetera. I said, but now he's back up and operational again. And so here's all the information. Go take him down. Fast forward 2 months later, the scariest moment of all my undercover missions. Scarier than getting arrested by dirty cops. Scarier than the other one where the cops took us out in the middle of the desert, if you've ever heard that episode. Scarier than the boss's boss, where the 6'3" guy that tried to test me, and then his boss that had guns on us that wanted me to show me my phone when I was dialing the number. All of those things pale in comparison to what happened next. I'm at my home in Salt Lake City, Utah, right? I'm in this beautiful home in a beautiful area, and I'm just enjoying being home with my family. And I get a knock on the door. All that stuff needs to stay out of my life, right? My real life, that stuff can't be a part of it, right? So I get a knock on my door. Open the door, and it's an FBI agent. I'm like, okay, cool. And he hands me a paper. It's a subpoena for a grand jury. And I'm like, what's this about? He says, it's a grand jury. You're being subpoenaed. And I'm like, crap, what did I do? I took this paper. I called my attorney. I said, what's going on here? I'm getting subpoenaed to a grand jury. I mean, what's going on? And he says, I don't know. I'll figure it out. So I sent him a picture of the thing. He made some phone calls and stuff. And he calls me back laughing. This isn't a laughing matter, right? I'm getting subpoenaed by the FBI. I mean, that's not funny. There's nothing funny. He said, here's what happened. He said, evidently, you had connected with some traffickers in Tijuana. He said, you had turned that information in to the federal police. He said, but they realized that he was an escaped convict from the U.S., so they turned that information into the FBI. The FBI didn't have the whole story of where he came from. They just arrested him. Boom. They went in, arrested this King Jesse. He's behind bars for good, which is great. He'd been doing this for 15 years, right? And they said, then after they arrested him, they wanted to find out everybody he was working with. So they pulled up, they got a subpoena for Google to give them access to his Gmail and got access to his phone, all of this stuff. So they're going back and forth on his phone, and they see on his phone these texts back and forth with this guy by the name of Paul Stone. Boom, right? And then they get into his Gmail, and there's this Gmail back and forth communications with Paul Stone. So they're like, well, this Paul Stone Gmail, we're going to find out who he is. So then they get a subpoena for that as well. They go into my Paul Stone. Now, Paul Stone had been in communication with traffickers in Haiti, traffickers in Thailand, traffickers in Cancun, traffickers in Mexico City. This was a big fish, this Paul Stone guy, right? So they're like, crap, this is a bad dude in America. He's in contact with all these guys. Now, I was super careful when I set up all of that undercover stuff. I made sure that when I set up the Gmail account, the phone number that was tied to it had zero connections to the real me. I did a VPN every time I logged in because I didn't know if these traffickers had, how high level they were. I didn't want them to be able to access my real me on any of these things, right? And so I was super careful on all of that. I made one mistake. One of the emails that I had received on one of these missions, I had forwarded it from my Paul Stone email. I had forwarded it to a guy by the name of Matt. Matt was CIA for about 14 years and now was working with the foundation that I was helping out at the time. And I had forwarded a couple of those emails that traffickers had sent to me. I'd forwarded them to him. And so when the FBI subpoenaed my Gmail, and they got into it, and they're seeing all of these people that Paul Stone is connecting with. And then this Matt guy who was CIA, they're like, oh, this is pretty strange. And so then they go and they contact him and they subpoena him. And they put him on, I guess, a gag order thing where he couldn't tell me. I'm like, I told him later, I said, Matt, you couldn't tell me? He goes, no, I couldn't. They have their procedures and stuff. And so he said, they came in and said, well, who's this Paul Stone? And he laughed. He said, well, he's one of the operators that finds these kids for the foundation to come in and help take down, et cetera. And so anyway, that was a scary moment. So I called, my attorney said, just call the special agent in charge. Tell her everything. And so I did. I went through the whole list, sent her all the information. They just wanted to get all the evidence they could on taking down King Jesse and the rest of that organization that was there. So the beautiful thing is there are hundreds and hundreds of victims that are not being controlled and trafficked by Gordo, King Jesse, even the guys that were running the hotel has all been shut down. And the beautiful thing as well is the fact that the corruption that was happening in some different areas down there within the law enforcement, that's all been cleaned up as well. And in fact, some of the best people in law enforcement that I've ever worked with are there in Mexico. So thank you for tuning in to another episode of Liberating Humanity. Thank you for joining.